And now, because it's on everyone's mind, is really the security of Europe. So the question will be around the future of Europe in the changing security landscape. There's diverse opinions on how involved the EU and Denmark should be in the geopolitical situations such as Ukraine, and also from a global trade perspective of what's been happening with the attack and captures of civilian or private sector vessels in the Red Sea. So the question is, what role should the EU play on the world stage, and what do we need to do from your position?
I mean, for me, it's pretty simple, and it has been for quite a while. We never really understood our role completely. We never saw the size of Europe, financially, economically, the impact that we have. And we never really stepped up as a group of countries to be very proud of the fact that we're European. And for me, that is something about the values. We live heavily by values in this part of the world, and that's sort of the starting point. And then, of course, with what has evolved around us, and I remember the Cold War very well. I remember the wall coming down very well. And then we all went, woohoo! This is fine. Everything's going to be wonderful. And we believed it. And we believed it to an extent that we forgot that we had to pay for our own security, even though NATO, tried to remind us quite often. And we also forgot that it's not only a question of money, it's also a question of how we deal with stuff. Let me just give you one example. We have in this part of the world 178 different weapon systems in Europe. In the US, they have 30. And it might be that some of the weapon systems in Europe, know how to talk together and work together and so on and so forth, but you can just hear when you're in business, that is not efficient. So we need to get this back in a different order. We need to get this organized in a more sort of, common and working together way. And for that, we need a commissioner. This is the suggestion from my party. We need a commissioner who has to oversee that all the weapon productions that we unfortunately, everybody hates the thought of it, but we need to do it. And we need to speed it up at that, but that has to be aligned within Europe to actually strengthen the NATO pillar, European pillar in NATO. And I agree, Taiwan is a big issue. And if that blows up, where is US? They're going to be busy in the South China Sea. And they will have to say to us, and they're already signaling, guys, you're on your own. Not saying that NATO will go away. NATO is still very important, that we will work together, but they will only respect us if we step up.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things with the upcoming U.S. elections. What will happen is a big unknown. Yes?
Yeah, if I just may add, I think one of the things that we Europeans sometimes tend to do, if we tend to focus on the U.S. election, we tend to focus on what will happen in November, whether or not it will be Biden or Trump. And I think I can blatantly say probably that 99% of all Europeans wishes that it will be Biden. But Trump had one important message that was actually true, and that was that we need to pay our 2% of GDP to the NATO contribution, which is basically a fee, an entrance fee, and I think that was right. And I think I'm a social democrat, and I wasn't raised talking about military equipment and the importance of armament. Actually, quite the opposite. But I think that is just the times have just changed, and we need to adjust to that. And I'm actually quite proud that we and all the parties that are standing up here agree on that, and also the Socialist People Party, which not necessarily always was in agreement with our the left was not always in agreement with you guys on the right, but here we actually do agree.
Middle.
Sorry. Middle. Yeah, middle. Okay. Yeah, the moderators they tend to say they're middle, but I say they're center right. Anywho, one last thing. I think we Europeans need to talk, and I say we. I know some of you probably aren't, but we Europeans need to focus more on what we the European Union as a political and economical union can do on the world stage. And I think we need to be much stronger in our own right and focus a lot less than what happens in November, because regardless of what happens in November, we need to take responsibility of our own continent. And I think that is one of the things that is really important in this election, that we need to, that we cannot arm Ukraine by ourselves is actually quite pathetic in my view. And we need to change that.
Thank you. Rasmus, how do we do this?
Well, I mean, it's strange to see that back in 2007, 2008, EU actually made an agreement that we need to start doing more research, development, and buy up defense systems together in EU. And we haven't done any of it yet. It's clearly because the numbers that Stine is saying is absolutely true, that we need to change that, first of all, to produce more here in Europe, and also to coordinate what it actually is we're buying, so we can also give to Ukraine. Right now, they get one system from Denmark, and they cannot get the missiles because there's one other country in EU who got them, because all the others have other kind of missiles and so forth. So we need to coordinate much closer and do this thing together. But the other hand, the other topic I want to raise here is the political question as well. What role is EU playing in the world? And the big problem is we have taken up the last 50 years actually talking about ourselves with each other, and now we need to step up and be a factor in the geopolitical sphere. And that means also changing some of the way we are agreeing in EU. It's strange when it comes to foreign policy, all 27 countries have to agree. And I'm sorry, we've seen that with the Ukraine question, that first it was Hungary who didn't want to step up on some of the issues, then it was Belgium who didn't want to do sanctions on diamonds at one point, and we see each country have their own agenda, of course. But we need to face up that the world actually needs EU on the geopolitical stage, and that means sometimes that 26 countries can agree on something, and that should be the stand of EU.
Yes, thank you. And Henrik, how do we take the step up from Denmark to EU to global?
Well, I think when I make a comparison between Europe and Southeast Asia or the United States, I think that Europe has become entangled in an old money mindset. So we're too aristocratic to think about necessities of any kind. And I think Asia and US in comparison is new money, so they still think about necessities. But we are too aristocratic to think about any necessities, be it military or economic or competitive, anything. We're just too aristocratic for that. So we have to snap out of this aristocratic mindset and get back to the new money mindset, where money actually matters and where necessity matters, because our competitors have the new money kind of mindset. So that's kind of a mental change we have to make. I agree that the backbone of European defense is NATO. It's the European pillar of NATO. But arms manufacturing is an important part of Europe. The problem with arms manufacturing is that the EU, and this is back to the old money mindset, we have put arms manufacturing in a taxonomy with tobacco and pornography. So institutional investors can't invest in arms manufacturing. So we have to remove arms manufacturing from this taxonomy to another taxonomy where you can get institutional investors to invest. And I know that work is being done in this mandate period, but we have to continue this work in the next mandate period, because Europe should not have a military dimension. There are both political and military reasons for that. The political reason is that as we speak, we have a civilian and a military mission to the Red Sea, and it's mandated by parliaments. And I like the idea that if we send a ship or personnel to a war zone, the parliament mandates this. This is good for a democracy. The other thing is that you can't imagine European defense without Norway and the UK, and they are not EU members. So you have to have a defense dimension that includes the UK and Norway. If you just close your eyes and imagine the European map, it makes no sense not to have Norway and UK in. So these are sort of the military realities. But arms manufacturing is really, really important.
Interesting. Stine, you had a comment?
No, I just wanted to, just one small correction. I mean, yes, it's true that there are many normally pension investors who would have something in their decision making that would prevent them from investing in arms and weapons. But if you look at the big institutional investors, I was just leaving the board of Allianz, and probably one of the world's biggest investors, and you can invest in weapons. There are certain weapons, and I'm sure you wouldn't like any investments in those, that you would go away from. You know, klyngebomb, I don't know the English word.
Cluster.
That's
cluster
bombs.
bombs.
Yeah, cluster
That
bombs.
sort of thing. But otherwise, there is no problem that you cannot invest in weapons.